Kew. Hopefully some of you were here before. The format is a little bit different tonight, so I'm going to try to quickly go through a few slides just to set some context. But this is all part of our ongoing village planning program, which is evolving, and I'll talk you through that. But first of all, I'd just like to introduce my colleagues who are here and some people who are in the audience, and try and get everybody's titles right tonight. So first, on my left, we've got Councillor David Lynette. David is a councillor for Kew. He is also cabinet member for culture, sport, and the voluntary sector. We've got Pamela Fleming, who is deputy leader. She's councillor for South Richmond, and she is cabinet member.
So we can just see who they are.
Sorry, I'm probably blocking, or if you can just. Yeah. And so Pamela is cabinet member for environment, business, and community. And then to my right, we have Professor Roger Mason, who will be chairing tonight, and you'll hear more from him in a second. We've got Councillor Peter Buckwell, who is also a councillor in South Richmond, who is cabinet member for highways and street scene. And we've got Councillor Martin Seymour, who is from Hampton North, and cabinet member for planning and strategic development. And in the front row, we've got Councillor Stephen Speak, who is cabinet member for finance and performance, who is North Richmond councillor, and Councillor Gareth Elliott from Whitton, who is cabinet member for digital and technology. Very exciting new role. And we've got some senior officers here, which you should be aware of. So if they could just put their hands up. Steve Diamond, Economic Development. Got Lynette Lawson-Tyres from Community Links, the Community Links team. Ishbel Murray. There's Ishbel back there from Environment and Community Services. David Noakes, Community Safety. And Harriet Steele, Village Planning. So we will be around afterwards, and if you want to follow up with any of us, we'll be very happy to talk. Now, just to quickly put all of this into context and just highlight some key issues. So we started this whole process at the beginning of 2000, when we came into 2010, with our all-in-one surveys, where we sent it out to everyone in the borough, from a ward perspective, asking what your priorities were for your areas. And for Kew, you won't be surprised that the results that came back priorities were, of course in this area, local parks and open spaces, public transport being an issue, and a priority, the level of crime and antisocial behaviour, shopping in your local high streets, and we can talk more about that, and also your library services as well. Now that all came together in what we called our village plans, and we based on how residents identified themselves and where they lived and the villages that they lived in. There were 14 village plans across the borough that were created, Kew being one. Now as part of this, in addition to village planning and setting the priorities and getting your feedback about what you wanted to see, there was also the very strong desire on the part of residents to make sure that they were involved in planning and had a say in planning issues, which of course affect us all and are very important. So we launched supplementary planning documents, which are documents that do need to be taken into account for planning when planning applications come up. And the Kew one was adopted in July 2014. This is a document. This is a live document that is evolving and ongoing. Something to be aware of, but certainly something that we continue to look for feedback and discuss with residents, and particularly with many of the pressures that are being put on us at the moment, and significant development pressures, which I'm happy to talk about more, coming from both the mayor and the government. So it's a very important plan, very important to have your say in those issues going forward. Now, overall, you've created a vision for Kew which guides all of these documents and the planning going forward, and we've got quite a long vision, which I won't read out completely, but it is about keeping the character of Kew as a great residential area, which you know that it is. And of course, we've got Kew Gardens, we've got Kew Garden Station and the character around that, the priorities of keeping our local shopping districts, and having this and maintaining this, as I say, in the face of many of the pressures, as a lovely residential area which has attracted us all, and we want to preserve that character. Now, the current phase of village planning, initially it was very much about planning and the physical environment in each of these areas. Our third phase really gets into the Kew community and how we can continue to strengthen the Kew community, how we are aware of the groups that exist, groups working together, really identifying the assets throughout the village community, and working to keep that stronger and to involve residents and make sure that they are involved in how the community develops. So it's very much that relationship between the council and within the community and the community groups, as well as the physical environment, let's say, which is really what the planning documents are about. Now, there are a few things I just want to make you aware of, a few issues, and one in terms of an opportunity for the community to get investment and to get those things that really enhance the community. As part of development, we get within the council contributions. There's something called SIL, a Community Infrastructure Levy. Now, part of that has now been established to go to something called the Neighbourhood Community Infrastructure Levy, which is a pot that is created on a kind of cluster basis, and this cluster is Richmond, Richmond Hill, and Kew together, where the community and groups within the community can come with proposals for how that local investment gets spent. And we've just done the first round of the of NSIL and the nominations, and it's gone out to a vote, which the council uses as a guide for where that money should go to. And actually, in this area, there's a very substantial amount. It was over £800,000 that was available for that, and the results will come out in December. But this will be an ongoing process where that fund will be made available from the development and the levies from development, that there will be multiple rounds, and it's a good thing to always be watching and be involved in. So we will announce the results of that in December, and then the next round will open in February. Now, a couple of things. Of course, Kew Garden Station. We are looking at accessibility improvements, and particularly around pedestrian and visitors. There were many comments about getting off from the station and understanding where to go to get to Kew Gardens, and not having to walk through the streets and through the car park. And so we're working with you to develop those plans at the moment, and we can talk about that more tonight. But a consultation on a new road layout closed on the 19th of November, and so Peter and team will be looking at that and coming back with the results on that. Of course, we've got the Brentford, across the river, Brentford Football Club development, which is coming now, replacing an existing stadium. And there are a number of issues, and we continue to work with and pressure TfL, and we'll be monitoring with TfL and Hounslow as it develops, and as we see the real impact of it, to make sure that the impact and the traffic impacts are minimized within the area. But that's an ongoing thing that we will be monitoring. And then finally, just to say, there are a number of ways that we've got to try to keep you informed, that I ask you to be aware of, and if you're not already part of them and receiving them, that you can join. So we have relatively recently launched a village newsletter, which goes out to 70 or 80,000 people at the moment. If you're not on it, you can sign up. We've had very good feedback on it. People do find it very informative. You can go to our website at Village News to sign up. If you don't like it, you can unsubscribe at any time, but it is very useful. We've got our community links team provides information on their part of the site. Any consultations that we're doing at the moment are all on consultation.richmond.gov.uk, and we've got a Talk Richmond section as well, where you can get involved in that. And of course, we're on Twitter and Facebook as well. And all of our contact details are on the website, so if you want to get in touch with us at any time, you can. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Roger, and we will start the question time.
Thank you very much, Paul. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for turning out on such a cold night. We're all locals, but it's a pretty cool walk, even from my house to this hall tonight. Now, I was asked to say a few words about myself, so that those who don't know me would at least know who the independent chairman is tonight. I moved to Kew in, I think it was 1973, because I had got a new job at Charing Cross Hospital when I was moving down from the Midlands, and I didn't really know very much about Kew other than it was a botanical garden here, and I chose to live here because it was quite a good place for quick access to the hospital in those days, probably not quite so quick by road these days. So that's how I came to live here, and I've lived here ever since, and I have to say I didn't know what a wonderful place it was when I came. I've learnt that over the years. So I was asked also to say what my sort of background in community engagement was. About 25 years ago, I was the co-founder of the Kew Residents Association, which some of you might remember fought a very strong campaign to stop Sainsbury's putting their superstore into what is now the Kew Retail Park. And it's still going. I've been the committee member and chairman and so on, but I'm just a member of the association now. I was a founder member about 3 years ago of a group called MASK, Southwest London, and MASK stands for Make Air Safe and Clean, because I'm a strong environmentalist, and MASK is an organisation that pulls representatives from all over Southwest London now together into a single coordinating committee, so that we all know what we're doing when we're organising events with respect to air quality and so on. More recently, I joined the Kew Society Executive Committee with specialist interest in the environment, and particularly in air quality. And I think that's probably as much as you need to know about me. So with that, I think we will start the question part of the evening, and we'll move to the submitted questions. And the first one comes from Claudine McCready. Do we have Claudine McCready in the audience? Claudine, would you like to put your question, please? You need to use, I should have told you, please use the microphone. This event is being streamed live on the internet, and it's particularly important that we all use a microphone so that the sound is transmitted with the streaming. Please hold the microphone close to your mouth as though you were a pop star, and then we'll hear you well. Thank you. Put your question, please.
My question arises from the disquieting, I think, and compelling, and cited some of the needs raised in the report. So my question is, in the light of this recent report for Richmond Parish Lands charity called On the Edge, what action is taking place in Kew to promote more effective collaboration between funders, local residents, businesses, and statutory, voluntary and community sectors to address increasing need, particularly among older people, carers, people with mental health issues and children with special needs.
Thank you very much, Claudine. Councillor Lynette, you're going to answer this question, please.
Thank you. Can you hear me at the back? Jolly good. My name is Councillor David Lynette for Kew, and I'm answering this in my capacity as the Cabinet Member for Voluntary Services. And thank you for that, Claudine. Just by way of explanation, this is the report, as you've heard. It's a report on people in need and the voluntary sectors, and it's commissioned by two large independent funders, and that's Richmond Parish Lands and Hampton Fuel Allotments. The report is fair, but it makes sober reading, and I certainly agree with you on that score. The Council does meet regularly with the two trust funders, and there will be soon be the launch of a place-based giving scheme in Richmond over a period of 2 years. The Needs Watch recommendation, which is in the report, will also be addressed to monitor existing and emerging need and to seek solutions within the benefit areas of the charities. This will involve a range of partners to take forward the recommendations. The Council is in partnership with the voluntary sector and businesses, and the ones that will focus on Kew are listening to the local community and through the village plan, as you've heard, working in partnership and making different stakeholders, such as businesses, health partners, council departments and the voluntary sector are aware of what we're doing. Commissioning services from the voluntary sector, and it's a vital part of what we do these days. And delivering targeted services, and I'll tell you a bit more about that as we go on. Now, you heard from Paul about the village planning process that we've been rolling out across the borough, and he mentioned the village planning fund. Now, this is a fund of over £800,000, and applications have been submitted from Kew, totaling £142,000. These will be decided next month, December, and there'll be a second round opening in February. So I would urge any other local bodies who haven't thought about a project to submit one. And I've certainly put my vote in for the 4 in Kew, so hopefully you all did as well. Obviously, the more votes that are put in, the better chance you get of actually getting the money for that local body. The Community Independent Living Service, which is aimed at older people, incorporates a wide range of services for the Kew Community Centre, acting as an information hub, and it's being recommissioned from September 2018. I'm sure you all know about the Kew Community Centre. It's a fantastic organisation. The Council also provides support to the Kew Neighbourhood Association, and I think Andrew Brown's here tonight. Where are you, Andrew? The newest chair of KNA?
Apparently, yes. What do you mean by community centre? Sorry.
I meant Kew Neighbourhood Association.
No, you meant St Luke's Community Centre.
Well, I was talking about that previously.
I'll just explain, because I'm the chair of Kew Community Trust, which runs Kew Community.
Could you use the microphone, please?
Sorry. Yes, I'm the chair of Kew Community Trust, which runs what is sometimes called Kew Community Centre. We have a slight problem with what we call it, but it's where the Avenue Club is run. But it is also a centre available for a lot of other community groups to use. So, but the SILS commissioning service is not just for older people. There are 6 bands of groups that are catered for. So it's not just
Claudine did ask me to concentrate on older people.
Thank you. David, continue, please.
Kew Library also offers a silver surfing IT taster sessions to get older people the skills and confidence they need. But one of the most effective ways that the Council is helping the elderly, and I include myself in that, is the Freedom Pass, which I use, and it gets us out and about around London, which is great. Supporting business, the Kew Traders Association are invited to the Business Retail Alliance meetings, which occurs every quarter. The council also funds the TW9 website, which is used to promote community events, and I think one of the founders is here. JF Burford, are you here? Well done, sir. The council supports grassroots initiatives through the Civic Pride Fund, and a couple of examples of that where we've helped out financially our Kew Village Market in the early days, and just recently there was a planting project on Kew Village Station, Kew Gardens Village Station, and I think we'll agree it looks marvellous. The council hosts, as I said, quarterly voluntary sector forums, which are an opportunity for organisations across the borough to come together and discuss concerns. And there's an opportunity for partnership working and understanding better what they do. Richmond CVS, which is the community voluntary service that's commissioned by the council to provide strategic leadership to all of the voluntary sector. And we've worked with a number of voluntary groups in Kew in the last few months. Focused work in Kew includes, as I said, Kew Neighbourhood Association, recommissioning of Sills, RCVS, supported Kew Village Market. But now moving on to youth services. I know it wasn't strictly in your question, but Achieving for Children provides services for children with special educational needs and disabilities, which is SEND for short, at the Wyndham Cross Centre. Parents of children with SEND can also access overnight short breaks at the Cross Centre. In addition, AFC has strong links with local schools in Kew. I'm a governor at Darrell, and I can testify to that. And for example, our school improvement service provides educational welfare and emotional health support. We also promote the voluntary sector and activities, as well as funding available to the families of SEND. Finally, on mental health, the council has recently appointed Councillor Mina Bond, who's with us here tonight, as the mental health champion to coordinate our response to a very vital effort. Thank you for standing up. And to help liaise with voluntary groups. And I understand you're going around some of the groups as we speak.
I certainly am, and I'm delighted to tell you that it's very good work, and we're very happy to support. I'm delighted to be appointed to this role. You know, obviously mental health is an issue that's currently being discussed a lot, which is a good thing, because before it was a stigma to ever say that you had a problem. And I have been visiting all the voluntary sector who are specifically dealing with people with mental health issues. And I'm glad to say that we are supporting a lot of them, and I'm looking to see who else we can support. Thank you.
I must admit, I wasn't, because I'm fairly new in this role, I wasn't aware of just how serious the problem is, especially with young people. I went to a lunch with the Off the Record body in Twickenham. I'm surprised to hear a third of young people, and that's mostly teenagers, do suffer from some sort of mental problem. So there is a lot more to do. I think I'm going to stop there now, because I'll probably have...
Thank you, Councillor Annette. Claudine, you are able, under the rules, to ask a supplementary if you wish, but please could we make it snappy?
My supplementary question is, who is going to take the lead in Kew in addressing what, according to the report, will be increasing need because of cuts to council spending in the next 4 years?
Councillor Annette?
I do have a very good support team for the voluntary sector. And I'm very happy for you to come along and meet my team and talk about your concerns in detail, if that would help you.
Thank you. Councillor Hodgkins?
Yeah, did you want to say something first?
I should say that as well as a cabinet member, I'm vice chair of the Hampton Field Allotment Charity. On this side of the river is the Parish Lands Charity, who are the lead on this issue.
And then, could I just add to that? Like Martin, actually, I'm a trustee of the Barnes Workhouse Fund, which It's a more localised version of Hampton Fuel Allotments, Richmond Parish Lands, and it is an excellent report, that one, and I think it's a very important point that you bring up. As you hear from David, there's lots going on, but as resources get tighter and as we see the opportunities and the need, there is the need for some coordination. And I know from Barnes Workhouse Fund, and it will be the same with others. You have a lot of active groups, and there is funding that's provided, but the system is very reactive to who is out there. And I think that report calls out, and the more you get into it, for some coordination, and not only coordination in looking at what groups are out there, how they can be working together, how they can make sure that they are using their resources to greatest effect, but also having an overall view of what the gaps are, who's not out there against the need, and being able to proactively go out and encourage people. And I think it's right. Certainly, the main funders play a role in coming together and taking that strategic view. But I do see the council as really ideally situated to help facilitate and help coordinate those discussions. It's not for the council to come up with all of the answers, but to try to bring people together to have that more coordinated view on what's happening, where are the opportunities, and how we look forward to what the need is, and I say what the gaps are as well as what the current provision is. So in Kew and across the borough, I think I would certainly see that as our role to try to help make those discussions happen and to facilitate.
Thank you. Councillor Fleming.
Yes, just very briefly, because I spoke at the AGM of RCBS yesterday, and that was very much the theme of collaboration and partnership. And in fact, they had somebody, one of the main speakers was from London Funders talking about place-based giving. So I think, and I felt that, working together and the partnership was emphasised by everybody who was speaking, and I spoke to at that, because we've all got to make better use of our resources and do more for less. And so it is, as the leader says, that's exactly what we need to do. So it will be going forward with the council, and we do have a very strong relationship with RCBS. And I think this is something that will come up at the voluntary sector forum. And also, just to mention that the other thing we are looking at is crowdfunding, because there are a lot of projects it can be working with, and so at the next village group forum on the 12th of December, we're going to have a session with advice on crowdfunding, because that can help, that little bit of funding, that can actually help to draw in quite a large amount in the end.
Thank you very much. I think with that we'll move on to the next question. Do we have Adam Beveridge in the room, please? No? Yes, if he's not here, then we don't take his question. So, Derek Stanton. Any news of Derek Stanton?
Is there?
All right, could you stand up, please, Mr. Stanton, and take the microphone and hold it like the pop star you are. Your question, please.
But do you want the precise question?
Yes, please.
Well, the precise question my wife and I dreamt up was this. Pavement, that means pavement parking. Pavement and inconsiderate parking is causing restricted road width in Broomfield Road. We live in Broomfield Road. Recently, a fire engine could barely squeeze through to visit one of the houses. I should say I'm fairly new to Kew, and I know that most of the roads have a bit of a parking problem, but this can be very severe when there's anything on at Kew or when the school is in operation. But the school is, I think, improving improving the behaviour of the parents in this regard. But what I really don't know is what exactly does a single yellow line mean, because it seems to be totally ignored.
Thank you. We'll get Councillor Buckwell to respond to that.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Stanton. Yes, a single yellow line basically means you may not park there during the hours that the controlled parking zone applies, or if there's no controlled parking zone, a time will be up on a small notice alongside it, restricting parking to those times, as opposed to a double yellow line, which means no parking at any time. Although, on a double yellow line, of course, you can unload and load for up to 10 minutes, and sometimes slightly longer. It doesn't mean you can never stop there. But those are the differences between a single yellow line and a double yellow line. So if you're in a CPZ, then the hours of the CPZ will apply to the single yellow line. But of course, maybe in the evenings, if it's out with the time of the CPZ, then people can park on the single yellow line. If they're parking on it during the hours of the CPZ, then of course they run the risk of a ticket. They run the risk of being sanctioned. We've looked at the road, Broomfield Road, and yes, it's very, like many of the roads in our borough, it's very tight, and we can see the problems if cars and vehicles park on the single yellow line, and we can see the problems of particularly the service vehicles getting through. Your road, like many others throughout the borough, suffers from this. So we're looking at the road. We're going to look to see what we need to do to restrict parking further, possibly by upgrading the single yellow to a double yellow. That may be one move we need to take. Or we may, of course, when you do a review like this, it does sometimes result in some parking having to be removed. And I know that the most sensitive issue you could ever suggest to our residents is to remove parking bays. But we are looking at the road. We haven't actually been in touch with the fire brigade to bring a fire engine down there. That might be done, but we are taking a review of the road in line with what you've said. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do you have any further question, Mr. Stanton? Thank you very much. And is John O'Sullivan in the room, please? Yes? Just hold it close to your mouth and speak normally.
Switched off.
Is it switched off?
Okay then.
Thank you.
I'm John O'Sullivan. I'm the chairman of the Kew Scout Group. I wouldn't say it's the best kept secret in Kew, but we've been in Kew since 1909. We've been on our present site since 1928. And about 5 minutes ago, the beaver colony finished, so 24 beavers went tearing through Kew, and 28 cubs have turned up for the Kew Pack meeting tonight. We have a total of 72 boys and girls who have been making the most of the Kew Scout Group for all the time they can remember. People might think that, well, you've got a Scout Hall, what else do you do in it? Well, it's more of a community hall than a Scout Hall. The other groups that use it are yoga, Pilates, Q2 players, Buddhism, Tai Chi, and a lot of karate lessons as well during the week when we're not using it. So my question tonight is Station Avenue, which includes the Kew Scout Group, where we have been located since 1928, appears to have been omitted from the Kew Gardens Conservation Area map. Could you rectify this omission? Station Avenue serves as a pedestrian access to Blake Mews, which is included in the plan. It has 4 businesses accessing into it, 2 residential apartments, and the Scout Hall, all of which serves to enhance the Kew Scout Group's claim to be marked and included.
Councillor Fleming, please.
Yes, well, the Station Avenue, along with the Scout Hut, is actually in the map on the Kew Conservation Area 15 map on the council website, and also on the local plan site. So I'm actually need to take this. I'm not sure quite where we're at variance on this, because it is on that map. I am told that whereas Station Avenue is on, it's also on the historic assets map in the Kew Village plan, but that it's possible that there was a confusion over the World Heritage Site, and this isn't actually a map that we are responsible for. So as far as we're concerned, it is actually on the conservation area map on the council website.
One of our Scout group members, who's been involved with the Scout group for over half a century, looked on the village plan that you published on your website, and his impression of it was that you excluded us. But obviously, if that map is out of date and it's now been updated, I'm happy to accept that.
Well, I will certainly go back. I mean, what we can do is go back, and I can double check as well. But I did check, obviously, for this meeting, and I was told it was there. But I will go back and double check, certainly, again, in view of what you say.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do we have Anne Rice in the room, please?
Yes.
Hello. Hello, I'm Anne Rice, and this is predominantly about traffic. Kew is a triangle bound by 3 main roads, 2 bridges, which are pinch points for traffic. The options for residents are very limited, and bridge traffic impacts us enormously, in particular Kew Bridge. Given that Transport for London and Hounslow Council are making decisions which arguably have a greater impact on Kew and South West London than the residents north of Kew Bridge, shouldn't we be strongly represented by Richmond Council? I'm talking in particular about the decision by London Borough of Hounslow to allow Brentford Football Club to develop a site between Kew Bridge and Chiswick Roundabout, plus the new plan for Supercycle Highway by London Transport for London. Supercycle Highway number 9 is to be routed through Wellesley Road into the North Circular on the other side of the bridge and across to Brentford. This will make Kew Bridge to the roundabout even more congested. The consequences will be felt not only by Kew, but a huge area of Surrey. I'm especially concerned for games, conferences and concerts at the new stadium. We have the example of Twickenham Rugby Club events to show how traffic is affected.
Thank you. Councillor Buckwell.
Thank you very much for your question. Yes, well, you certainly are represented most robustly by the council on all of these, but if I take the Brentford football ground first, that planning application was approved, I think, in 2014. It's done and dusted. There is a revision being considered later this month to allow rugby games to be played there, but that's all. As far as the stadium, the properties that go with it, the number of games and other activities that can take place, the planning permission has already been granted for that. So we wouldn't be able to overturn that. And we are we have a good relationship with Hounslow, and we're quite robust with them over these things, and we have been all the way along when the decisions were made to move the ground from Griffin Park. On the C9, the cycle track, again, we're making our representations to TfL because that's Transport for London. That's their route that they want to put up Chiswick High Street. Now, you may have a lot of concerns about it, but I can assure you the residents of Chiswick anywhere near the High Street are livid about it, and they're already putting up a lot of opposition to it. So whether it goes ahead in its current form, I don't know. But we are talking to TfL about it. We're putting our representation into the consultation, which of course is under consultation at the moment by TfL, and we will be most robust about the points that you've brought up, the effect upon Kew Bridge. Kew Bridge and through to the Chiswick Roundabout is difficult enough as it is, and if we put a cycleway through there and through into Brentford, if it does anything to increase congestion or interfere with the traffic flow through there, that we would be obviously very concerned about that, and we will be most robust in our argument.
Thank you very much. Do you want to come back, Anne, on that?
Yes.
Please do.
I'm obviously aware that you have no comeback anymore about the Brentford Football Club, but I just wonder just how hard Richmond fought in the first place, because I don't think anybody realises quite how bad it's going to be south of the river. And Wellesley Road is one of the roads that we can now use to get home. It's going to be closed to traffic. I fail to see how you're going to say, after the whole thing has happened, I think you said earlier that you were going to be watching carefully and just seeing how it's all going to go, but I don't see how you can reverse these things once they've been started. So, you know, I just shudder for us on Kew Green particularly, but all of Kew. And I think it's all a bit late, but I don't know what else you can do. But I feel very strongly that Richmond doesn't seem to have helped us.
Can I answer that one? Because my name is Michael Horner. Thank you. Hi, my name is Michael Horner. I'm the old local councillor for Kew. Just an answer, to your question about you don't feel that there was enough of a campaign. I personally mounted the campaign to try to stop it, and I got a whole load of Queen's mothers in the playground. We distributed every single household in Kew. That was 5,000 leaflets. We got the leaflets all designed, hand-delivered them, so everyone was personally communicated. We ambushed Hounslow Council with all our comments, but where it was difficult was the fact that we were coming from Richmond Council and this was a separate council. It was Hounslow Council, and we did our very best. We really inundated them, but we could only do so much at the end of the day. We mounted a campaign and then they overrode it.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bond.
Oh, and we also had, several meetings that was organised by Zach Goldsmith and coordinated residents in St Anne's Church as well. So we did several things and we did fight.
Thank you. Councillor Hodgkin, you want to say first?
Well, I only want to say yes because I was the cabinet member for environment at the time, and we did put in some very, very robust responses from Richmond on behalf of to Hounslow, but of course this is a Hounslow application. I should also say that we worked closely with the Kew Society. We had several meetings with officers and the Kew Society, so we did actually put up a robust defence. But it is an application. It was a Hounslow application, not so that we can only do what we could do at the time. But I think Councillor Speed may have been involved in some of those meetings with the Kew Society, but I can't remember.
That's true. At the time, I had the cabinet portfolio that Peter now holds, and we did actually secure Section 106 money from Hounslow in order to help fund some of the parking improvements that are due to be implemented around Kew Green. So there was an active dialogue. We did, as my colleagues have said, we did what we could under the circumstances. But Hounslow is a separate council. They had their professional advisors basically saying that the transport situation will be sorted. We do have concerns, clearly we do have concerns that events that occur in the Beast Stadium is going to affect Kew, and it's going to affect the Kew Road, it's going to affect the South Circular, and we will be monitoring it closely.
Thank you.
I say that Kew Bridge is actually owned by two boroughs. Halfway across Kew Bridge it becomes Richmond. Sorry, just say.
Kew Bridge is halfway across becoming Richmond Council. The two boroughs meet in the middle of Kew Bridge.
Well,
that's what I needed to say.
Okay. Can I just? I mean, we kind of look back there about what's happened in the past, but moving forward, can I say I absolutely agree with you about that problem, where we have certainly here decisions being taken by TfL and by Hounslow. In Barnes, I've got exactly the same thing with TfL and Hammersmith Bridge, where it's actually Hammersmith and Fulham Council that controls the bridge completely. And in many ways, we're the last ones to know when they're about to shut the bridge down. And they're threatening to shut it down for a year, and we still haven't had the plans. So we do, and Peter and I talk about this quite often, we do have the frustration that decisions are being made north of the river that impact us more than they impact people there if they're on those river crossings. To the point where I'm saying, not with the let's say the complete glee of our officers to say give us full control of those bridges because we will have the priority over them and do a better job. So we are talking to TfL. They're not an easy organisation to work with on a strategic basis. You talk individually about roads and buses, but I agree with you completely that those decisions that are being made north of the river have a great impact on us, and we need both more awareness, communication, and more influence over those. And we will be continuing to push. It's not an overnight solution to it, but you're absolutely right on it. And we're very aware of that, and it's in my area as well, and we will be pushing against them on that.
Could I just add from the chair that both the Kew Society and the Kew Residents Association made a very robust response to the plan application. And the Kew Society actually took one of the speaking slots at the planning committee meeting for the Brentford football development, which I think is probably the longest meeting in memory. It went on, to my recollection, about 3.5 hours. Please also, as well as contacting your councillors, contact your local associations who take an interest in these things, because they really do take an active role in these planning applications. This is a very contentious issue. Is there anything else on this one? Martin Taylor, who is a trustee of the Kew Society, who actually made the presentation at the planning committee for the Brentford Football Club.
Roger, thank you for that. I'm not asking anybody to look backwards. Hold it close. Can you hear me now? I'm not asking. Thank you, Roger, for that introduction. And I'm not asking anybody to look backwards at the historic planning decision which has been made, but there is a fresh planning application which is still to be considered by Hounslow. And if I can briefly follow through on the question of the support from Richmond Council, can I ask who from Richmond Council, if that fresh application is being heard on the 8th of December, who will be appearing for Richmond Council to speak against the consent being granted?
Any of our panel answer that? Councillor Fleming.
I will find out, and I will have to ask tomorrow and find out who is looking at that. I don't know right now. So.
What's the second planning application? Sorry,
What's the second planning application for?
It's basically for rugby, to hold rugby matches there. So I understand.
Councillor Buckland, I'm not sure that that suggestion is correct. I think the consent for the rugby use has been granted. The fresh application is for a reduction in the community facilities which were part of the reason for the original consent being granted, and for a reduction in the number of seats within the stadium, but for an increase in facilities for example, television facilities, and as a result, the commercial equation for the promoter of the scheme is substantially improved, whilst the disbenefits to the community of the skyscraper blocks which have been consented remains the same, along with all of the transport issues which are unaddressed.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Taylor. I stand corrected. I didn't know that. I thought it was to allow them to hold rugby matches there. I do apologise if I'm wrong.
Do you want to say something, sir?
If I may.
Please.
I've got a supplementary question on behalf of my wife. Well, not a question actually, it's a statement. I used to live on Strand Green before we moved to Kew Green, and I've many dealings with Hounslow Council. And the fact is, all the councillors live out near Heathrow, and they don't give a toss about what happens up this end, and that's the simple truth.
Thank you for that comment. Perhaps I just close this part of the questioning by saying that I suspect we're all going to be in an even worse situation soon, because the Chiswick Curve planning application was turned down by Hounslow and has now gone to appeal. I think that's correct, isn't it, Martin?
I keep standing up. It is going to appeal, and again, perhaps there is a question here as to whether or not there will be a representative or representation done the Rule 6 potential for Richmond Council to appear at that inquiry in the same way as Kew Gardens is now Rule 6 representative speaker, and potentially the Kew Society is also a speaker at the inquiry, which begins on June the 12th next year. Anyway, the Chiswick Curve rumbles on.
Thank you very much. I think we'll move to the next question now. Jack Andrews. Did I see Jack? Yes.
Thank you. My question is short and sweet, and I hope it's not an impertinent one. It concerns the proposed improvements to the station forecourt at Kew Gardens here. Can we assume that members of tonight's panel have had the opportunity of reading the comments which have been sent in by local residents and tradespeople? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Andrews. Councillor Buckle.
Yes, I can answer that. Not the details, no, we haven't, because at the moment the results of the consultation are under review and being analysed. So I haven't been through all the detailed comments. I've got an overview which I've been given of most of the comments, the most common ones that have been put forward. I have them here with answers. I won't go through them all, but they're questions like, why are you changing the existing parking? Why is the bus stand being relocated? Why is the loading bay that Tesco used, why is that being moved? Where will the bread stand go? Why hasn't the drainage been fixed? Those are the most common questions that have come up, and I do have the answers to those. But the analysis is not complete yet, and until that is complete and it's published, not all councillors will have read it.
Do you want to come back?
Just briefly, if I may, Chairman. And if you could just say perhaps later, I am a resident of Leighton Place, which is of course part of this forecourt, and I know that comments were made by many of us to the fact that the plan appears to overlook the fact that Leighton Place even exists.
I see. All right. I'll have another look at that, and if I can get your details, I'll come back to you on it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Richard Ward, would you put your question, please?
Thank you. I'd like to thank you all for giving us this opportunity this evening. I live on the best side of the railway, which is the other side. I've also got a fairly simple question, maybe a naive one. Is the council currently looking at better signage to Kew Gardens in the Kew Plaza on the east side of the station, together with better parking provision for cyclists who currently lock bicycles on many items of street furniture here? And which local groups are you involving in the deliberations? I have to say I'm not a cyclist, but it's actually a bit of a mess during the day. I took a photograph yesterday, which I've got here with me. But if you're a tourist and you come to Kew, I think it's a bit messy and it could be improved. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Buckle again, please.
Well, thank you very much indeed for the question. I'll deal with the signage first, and then we'll have a look at cycle parking. The council has commissioned consultants to develop a legible London wayfinding scheme for the area around Kew Gardens station. Now that is being looked at and developed at the moment, and the hope is that we'll have maps and signage ready to be installed sometime in 2018. Now, I'm not sure what sort of, between now and then, what sort of consultation with local groups will be carried out. Obviously, we will have some consultation on the signs and where they go and what they look like, etc. So local groups will get an opportunity to have a look at that once we've got the consultant's report. But it is being worked on and it is going to happen. Now, cycle parking. I'm surprised if there's much space left for cycle parking, because our cycling officer, Carol Crankshaw, she puts the cycling staples, the parking staples, those loops that you see around the place, she puts them in wherever she can find a space. We put a lot in right across the borough. So if you feel that there's room for more around Kew Gardens Station and that it would benefit from that, then let's have some ideas on where they might go, and I'm sure we can get them put in very quickly, so that hopefully that will encourage cyclists not to simply park their bikes and chain them up to local pieces of street furniture. I know that happens because, of course, cyclists like to cycle from point to point. They always like to be able to cycle to the station and to park at the station. So it is important that we do have sufficient parking at our stations. I don't know about the big racks. I don't know where you would put a large sort of cycle racks, the sort of double two-tier things we have in Richmond and Twickenham, etc. That's probably too much for Kew, but I'm sure we could put some more staples in discreetly and thereby try and improve the amount of dedicated parking for cyclists.
Thank you. Thank you. We move on to Robert Guy. Is he here, please? Robert, put your question, please.
Thank you. Just picking up on something earlier, I was privileged to be a trustee of Kew Community Trust for quite a long time, and I urge all of you to support it. It's a tremendous charity and does great work here in Kew. The question I'm coming to is about mobile phones. The other day I got a letter from EDF. It's a very nice letter. It wasn't a bill. The first thing it did was to congratulate me on the installation of a smart meter. So looking at a very smart member of Kew now who's fully tuned into EDF. The second part of the letter informed me that it wouldn't work, which was slightly disappointing. When I asked why this was, it said we haven't got a mobile phone signal. So the problem is that in many parts of Kew, I think the mobile service is very poor, and in some cases, like my own in Airedale Road, it's non-existent. So my question is, what can the council do to help improve the situation?
Councillor Seymour.
Thank you, Mr. Guy, for your question. I'm going to take the opportunity here of using the resources we have available, but I just want to give you a very quick answer from a planning perspective, and then ask my colleague, Councillor Elliott, who's the Cabinet Member for Digital and Technology, to supplement that. The Council, obviously, is not the supplier of the networks, and the network suppliers are the ones who are actually responsible for providing the coverage. From a planning point of view, I was looking back over past applications and prior notification applications, and the coverage hasn't actually come up as an issue. So what we can do from the planning perspective is to ask the applicants in future to make sure that they include coverage as part of the reason why they're making the application, which might help their case. But going forward into the future, I wonder if I could ask Councillor Elliott if he has any views on the coverage going forward.
Would you like to use this microphone, Councillor Elliott?
Taller than me, unfortunately. I'll try that one. Yeah. Right. Thank you. Well, I think it's a really good question, and it's actually one that, as a council, we've never really focused on. And we now have a cabinet member and myself that is focusing on digital and technology, and that really is, I think, quite exciting. So, as part of that, I'm writing a brand new digital strategy, and that is looking at things like mobile coverage, broadband coverage. And I've got that on 4 pillars, but the first 2 of that are, I think, are the most interesting. One is digital first in that we think, and what we do is we have an impact assessment on digital in all our policy documents that go forward. But the second is that infrastructure side of things, and it really is now us focusing on how as a borough we can look at ourselves and also how the council can be enablers. So do we have sites that we can put forward for mobile infrastructure? We do have, though, one other issue I think is worth mentioning. I think in 2003 we did have an option for a mast, and I think, what was the name of the tower?
It was the Campanile. I don't know if people remember, but way back there were proposals to put masts in various places in Kew, and I'm afraid residents objected hugely to the creation of these masts. And one of the things I did long before I was a councillor, sitting on the Kew Society, was to try and organise the creation of phone masts in the Campanile in Kew Gardens, and some of you may remember that. Unfortunately, although Kew Gardens consulted all their staff and they got the proposal sorted out, the phone companies themselves then decided they wouldn't share that facility. So it actually came to a halt because the phone companies didn't sort it out. But there were good ideas at the time.
So I think from that, obviously we have to be understanding if we haven't got the infrastructure in place, you don't have the signal. But that's the thing what I'd like to do. And I'm using this new role, I'm going to other councils and I'm taking on learnings of what they're doing. And recently I was in Cambridgeshire and they've got an initiative called Connecting Cambridgeshire. And effectively what they're doing is taking evidence from residents on what the coverage is like in their area. And then they map that with what the mobile operators can have on their own systems, and then look at where they differ. And what we can do is we can sort of challenge those operators and say, well, actually, you might say you've got a lot of coverage here, but we may not. So this may be one of the things that I could take forward. It's certainly what I'm looking at, but those kind of learnings and getting what your perception is out there and taking that to the operators. So I think there's a lot we can do, and I think it's fantastic that we are now actually focusing on this as a council, and we actually have a cabinet now which is looking at digital and technology. So hopefully, bear with me, we should we'll be looking at this and hopefully it will get a lot better.
Thank you very much.
Can I just add to that, just to echo Stephen's point? In the past, we all want very good coverage, but there has been opposition whenever a new mast is proposed, and so it's not so straightforward. One thing I would do, I'm not a smart meter expert, but EDF must have this issue not only in areas but within certain types of homes. I would go back to them and just ask them why they don't have a meter that can also work through Wi-Fi and just be feeding back using other communication technology. Anyway, I'm getting it, but there are things that we're trying to do to improve coverage. It is a lot up to the companies themselves, but we can help in a way that residents feel comfortable with.
Just on that point, if you do have absolutely no coverage, you can go to your operators, and often they will come and help with the repeater devices that can strengthen the signal. So if you don't, do contact your operator, because there are ways that they can provide devices that can make signal stronger. So just in case, do take up that option.
Thank you. We'll move to the next submitted question, which is from Sarah Head, if she's in the room, please. Yes, over there, please.
Hello. As we've heard tonight, the traffic pressures on Kew are increasing, and it sounds like they're set to increase further. And we held earlier this year a recent petition to call for a 20-mile-an-hour limit on the roads most impacted as rat runs, which are West Park Road, Beechwood, Burlington and North Road near the station. We submitted that to the local councillors, and we had an overwhelming 80% of local residents. Peter Halpin and I went door to door and polled all of the families, elderly people and the various people that live on these roads. Over 80% felt the traffic speed in those roads was dangerous. We had a lot of anecdotal evidence of near misses, of a Mini on its bonnet spinning in the road, some pretty scary stories. However, after some monitoring equipment that was installed on those roads for a week or so earlier in the summer, there's been no response, and it was ruled that by the council and the traffic officer that as there hadn't been enough accidents and only one reported accident in 5 years, this problem, the 20 mile an hour, would not be addressed. So we'd like to ask how many accidents or fatalities will it take before the views and the feelings of the 80% that we polled will be taken into consideration.
Thank you. Councillor Buckle.
Well, thank you very much indeed for the question. And I feel that I believe I encouraged you to carry out that petition. I think we met at a meeting at the Records Office earlier in the year. I was addressed by two residents of, I think, West Park Road, who wanted to revive or carry out a new petition, and you did. And unfortunately, you then came up against the council's regulations on evidence-based decision-making, and your requirement for 20 miles an hour in those roads was turned down. Not just on the basis of accidents, it goes on volume of traffic and another set of considerations as well. Very frustrating for you, and very frustrating and a bit embarrassing for me, because as I say, I was in at the beginning of that. This has happened sadly all over the borough, and we are both inundated with requests for 20 miles an hour, and residents go out and they raise their petitions, quite rightly, and they put them in, and then they come up against, well, what is the evidence? And they get turned down, because that is the policy as it is on the table at the moment. It can't go on like this. It doesn't work. And at council 2 days ago, I made the announcement, having got approval from cabinet and also from councillors, that we will look at a 20 mile an hour scheme right across the borough. So I've got to get the policy changed, which is one of the steps I've got to take. We've got to talk to TfL. The surrounding boroughs like Hounslow and Wandsworth and Hammersmith and Fulham who've done this, so we get the best practice. And we will produce a scheme for 20 miles an hour across this borough, which will, I imagine, certainly include all the residential areas and some of the through roads as well. I don't want to preempt what it actually will look like, but that's what we've got to do. We're going to produce a plan, and that will come out for consultation. So as far as West Park Road is concerned, Burlington and Beechwood, if you could be patient just a little bit longer, you will get your 20 miles an hour. That is if this party remains in power after the May elections. You'll certainly get it. It's not been wasted. The time knocking on doors hasn't been wasted, and it will go ahead. When? I know, yes, when. As soon as we can. We've got to get the work done and the scheme published as quickly as possible, and the policy changed.
Can I just add to that? It will take a few months, and there is an election that gets in the way there, but not to draw that too much in it. But you know, as Peter said, I certainly understand and recognise the frustration. We have this on a number of things to do with roads and traffic, where we talk about what's the accident rate and the speed rate there, and we've got a lot of pressure on our roads, and I share the feeling quite often. And we have the same with the level crossings of, you know, how far does it have to go before something happens, and unfortunately it's about priorities and this commonality. But in this case, I'd like to think that we are not afraid to say when a policy that seemed right at the time isn't working, it isn't fitting. And as Peter said, what we were getting was quite clear support in different areas for this. But part of that evidence-based approach as well was thinking was that if you've got just a mix of 20 and 30 all over the place, and I do it at the moment, you lose track of where you are, and it becomes very confusing. So we've come to the conclusion that you've either got to have a consistent area of it overall, one way or the other. So it will be consulted on, it will go out to people, but we will be putting that forward, and we do think that it is that it is right that we look on a borough-wide basis. And as Peter says, it's, you know, when you cross over the borders in Hounslow and to Wandsworth, we're seeing more and more of that. So it is about getting consistency. It will take a few months to do it. There are specific questions to get down into exactly which roads will be included, and we will be coming forward with a more detailed proposal on that. But clearly we need to advance and improve that policy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll move, I think, to the last question now, which of the submitted questions, which is from Brian Staveley. Brian Staveley in the room.
Thank you. It relates to the station again, which I know has cropped up a couple of times. But really, I'm asking, when is Kew Gardens Station, which serves a large community and a World Heritage Site, going to get improved access for the disabled and a lift for parents with pushchairs and prams? I realise multiple agencies and stakeholders have an interest in the station. It's not a simple building, but I don't detect any enthusiasm by any of these agencies to solve this highly embarrassing problem. It irritates me when I see there's an elaborate scheme to embellish the flower beds at the station. In my mind, it's fiddling while Rome burns.
Well, Councillor Buckwell, I think this is your response again. I should just point out, though, that the flower beds at the station, that was a project organised by the Kew Society and funded by TfL. So that was independent of the council.
What I'm asking is
if that sort of collaboration is possible there, why can't it be extended to improve something that's of a fundamental human value? I mean, I don't...
Thank you.
Do people care about the flower beds more than the disabled?
Thank you. Councillor Buckwell.
Yes, I can answer that question. The station is actually owned by Network Rail. It's not a TfL station. It's Network Rail. And they have it listed as step-free access, which, let me just...
We're not Network Rail.
I mean, it is, but of course to get from one side of the station to the other, you've got quite a long journey. And whereas this side of the station is served by a bus, I don't think the other is. I think you've got to walk quite a way before you can get to a bus. But in fact, if you approach both sides of the station, you can get onto the station platform without having to access steps. So it's listed as step-free by Network Rail, and that's why nobody's looking at it. Now, it depends to what extent the requirement is to go over that bridge from one side of the station to the other. I don't know what that is. And
everyone who wants to go to Kew Gardens starts on one side and has to be that starts on one side. Everyone who goes to Kew Gardens, even if they're on the right side when they arrive, they'd have to cross when they leave. And that's thousands and thousands of people. And some of them are disabled and some of them have pushchairs.
Okay, no, I see the point entirely. I must admit I haven't come across this one before, which shows that I was a bit out of place with regard to the Kew Gardens station. But I hear what you say, and of course it's obvious when you explain it to me, because I know the station very well. So all I can say is we will take this up with Network Rail, and we will try and... They do have a programme for providing step-free access to all of their stations, which they're rolling out bit by bit, because they, like everybody else, are short of money. Teddington is going to get a lift, or two lifts, one each side of their bridge, so that you can get across if you're disabled without having to negotiate steps and stairs. They are looking at a number of other stations, St Margaret's, and others. So we will meet with them and get Kew Gardens put onto the list. That's all I can suggest that we do.
At a minimum, you could just ask them to remove step 3. I mean, that would be the first solution, because that way no handicapped person would even bother to go there. They can always, of course, then be directed to Richmond and to turn around, which is what the staff suggests. But the mere fact that it's labelled is well, I think it sums it up.
No, thank you very much indeed. Thank you for the question.
Thank you. A comment at the back.
I just wanted to add that when it comes to the signage, can you imagine how embarrassing it will be when there's a sign that says, by the way, if you're disabled or in a pushchair, you have to go under the arch bridge, up round the back, over the humpback bridge and round to the other side. So it's going to be embarrassing with the signage as well. So we're best to sort it out. There is room to have a lift on the outside of the footbridge, which should actually not involve Network Rail, because that territory then becomes the council's land.
Well, I'm not sure exactly where the council's land ends and Network Rail begins. I know at the front of the station, in order to undertake the proposals that we have for relaying the carriageway there, we are actually having to buy land off Network Rail. So from that, I assume the Network Rail boundary comes quite far out of the front of the station and would include any land, certainly on this side of the station, where a lift might go. However, those are details. I'll take the point that we're looking to remove the step-free access label against Kew Garden Station so that it can be assessed for a lift, or 2 lifts, one each side of the footbridge.
Thank you very much. Well, we now come almost exactly on time to that stage in the evening where I throw the meeting open to the floor for questions from anyone who is here. I'm going to ask you to raise your hand if you want to ask a question. I will look around and find as many raised hands as I possibly can. When I ask you to stand up and give your name and your question, please, would you be so kind as to make it as succinct as possible so that we can fit as many questions in this session as possible. And likewise, the councillors have all been very good at keeping on time. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. But I ask you to maintain that discipline for the rest of the session, please. Right, who would like to ask a question? Yes, sir.
Hi.
Please give your name first.
Yes, my name is Brendan Caulfield. This concerns building control. It also concerns the entire Kew Peninsula. The original railway station was going to be along North Road near Atwood Avenue, but the soil was unstable there. This whole peninsula is very young silt with clay way down. It's also an aquifer. The mayor is relaxing planning regulations, and so people will build upwards and outwards, but also they build down. So, but at present there are no ability to object to downward excavations, even though they're going to destabilise the adjacent properties and interfere with drainage. That all comes under building control, and the public have no right of access to building control. Such regulations are not dictated by Parliament. It's at the discretion of individuals of council to set up their planning structure. Are there any plans to change what is now controlled under building control and allow the public to object on ecological and geological and hydrological and other environmental grounds?
Thank you for that. Which of our councillors would like to respond? Councillor Fleming.
I can start and I'll let Martin continue. Yes, we have, as from next April, Article 4 directions will be imposed so that people that will have to be planning, little applications will have to go to planning, so will be considered. That doesn't mean they're going to be refused, but it does mean that people have the opportunity to object to planning. And there is also, I should say, we did now, I think it's probably probably 18 months old. A good practice guide for basements as well. But I will hand over to Councillor Seymour, who I think sat on the scrutiny panel, didn't you?
The basement scrutiny panel have brought this on. It's taken about 2 years actually to get to where we are, but the Article 4 on basements comes into force in April of next year, which means from that point on, if anyone wants to put a basement in, it has to go to a planning committee, and that means it has to go to consultation with the public around that area. So if there's any possibility of you're being affected by it, you will have the opportunity to raise all the points that you've made in your question.
You want to come back on that at all?
No, I'm just glad that some progress has been made on it. But I was involved in something a couple of years ago, and the only way I could raise the point was I raised the fact I wasn't able to raise an objection. So it got onto the agenda.
You're absolutely right in what you're saying. It is because of situations like that that we have now moved to the Article 4, which, as I say, comes into force in April.
Thank you for raising that question. Another question? Madam, in the green cardigan there, please.
Caroline Dunfield. I've got a picture here which I'll toss up to you. A thing with 6 axles. Three lots of axles, like 6 sets of wheels on each side, parked outside Tesco's. We have a very small Tesco's, and they have deliveries from massive great things that shouldn't be allowed inside the circulars, let alone the M25. Have you any comments on that? The size of vehicles that are allowed inside small residential areas.
Well, that sounds like it's up your street.
Sorry, I don't want to interrupt.
I'll ask my colleague, Councillor Seymour, to
I was only going to say,
the answer up.
I'll have a look at that particular case, but the type of delivery vehicle is quite often conditioned for the permissions for these sorts of operations to take place, and that does look excessive. 1, 2, 3, well, that's an 18-wheeler actually. That's much too big. So I'll have a look at that particular case and see what the conditions are on that.
Councillor Horner.
I can also answer part of that, because we've had in the past several complaints about these large vehicles going in, obviously by Tesco's. And when we looked into it and studied it, because the option was to perhaps halve the vehicle size, but then because there's so much demand from the local residents, it turned out they'd end up increasing more traffic by having smaller vehicles. So in a way, it's become a victim of its own success.
It is a fact, as you say. If you're going to have smaller vehicles, then you have to have more frequent deliveries to get the same amount of
So we tried to solve it, but we have looked into it, and I think the only option is to have the larger vehicles coming in at early morning. But then if we're going to start doing this other consultation, maybe we can address that as part of the plan.
Any further comment on Tesco? Yes, I thought so. Here, please.
Yeah, surely, if you adopt the new plan, there's no way those large vehicles will be able to turn around, because the space there'll no longer be a curve at the end, will there?
Thank you. David, Lynette, I think you studied that plan very closely, haven't you? Would you like to comment on that?
Yes, this is the engineer's comment about is the turn in the road too tight. The layout here has been designed to have the shortest possible crossing distance for pedestrians, whilst still allowing an articulated vehicle, i.e. Tesco's, to manoeuvre around the bend in the road. Increasing this crossing distance would relax the turn in the road, but it would also remove the parking bays on either side of the new footway. A common comment has been about raising the pedestrian crossing, but we are unable to do this on such a bend when you have such large vehicles like buses and lorries turning. So, however, by keeping the turn tight, vehicles will have to reduce their speed, which negates the need for a raised feature.
Thank you for that. Yes, of course, Councillor.
Yes, this is extraordinary, isn't it? I didn't realise that quite that size of vehicle was visiting Tesco's in Kew. I think with the plans that we have to redesign the forecourt there, it will be more or less impossible for a vehicle of quite that size to get around, and that's probably one of the benefits of the scheme. It is designed for an articulated vehicle to be able to go around, but nothing like as big as that. So I think that will be one of the advantages of the scheme. It will, I'm sure, force Tesco's to use smaller vehicles.
Madam, there's a microphone over there. Please, could you stand and give your name, please?
Hello, Lottie Campanale, Kew candidate for Liberal Democrats. The scheme does need to take into account other large vehicles because several school buses use the Kew station area first thing in the morning and in the late afternoon, and those school buses take a huge volume of traffic off the roads. Otherwise all those kids will be using cars to get to school. So we do need to take this into account, and I don't think you've considered how many double-decker school buses stop there in the morning and how many of them do need to make that turn. So even if we do get rid of Tesco's delivery lorries, which surely, if you needed to have more smaller Tesco delivery lorries, you just get electric ones, which is coming in very fast now. So there's absolutely no reason why you can't have 2 smaller electric vehicles delivering to Tesco's. And please take into account the coaches for the schools. Come and have a look at 7:30 in the morning and see how many cars have been taken off the road.
Thank you. Yes.
Yes, certainly you're quite right. I think we do know that the numbers of coaches or buses that are using that area in the morning, and those which in fact park up on the main road just outside the shopping centre there. The scheme as we have it, I'm told by highways engineers, is designed such that you will get a double-decker bus being able to turn at the apex of the triangle, let's call it. But a double-decker bus, I think, is half the length of what I'm looking at here. About half the length. Well, yeah, electric vehicles, of course, is a revolution that we're going through. We're looking for, I'm sure, that the targets that have been put down of 2026 and 2040 for electrifying our vehicles on London's road will be met. It's only just started. A lot of people are buying electric cars. We as a council are trying to put in a network of charge points throughout the borough. We've got about 270 on the books, but it is difficult sometimes. Some of these, certainly the standalone charge points, of which we have a contract with Source London, have to go through planning permission because they take up a certain amount of space on the footpath. And whereas some of those applications have gone through, others have been opposed on the grounds of the fact that they remove parking slots. And here we're back to residents being very concerned if parking bays are lost. And we actually had 5 turned down at a planning committee meeting last night, which was a big blow to me because it means I've lost 15 curbside charge points. And it will take many months to find new slots, new spaces for them, and to go through the planning process again.
Could we have the microphone? Oh, use this microphone here, Stephen. Councillor speaks, wishes to respond.
Sorry.
Thank you. No, I was going to say that Tesco are being particularly naughty. I represent the North Richmond ward, which is the bottom end of Kew Road, and anyone who's been down there will know that they park outside the Tesco's at the bottom there at Cafe Mathey for far too long. And what I would have to say is that the requirement is when they're loading and unloading, it's supposed to be a continuous process. So therefore, if you see them, as I have done, sitting there, and as this picture shows, with the back up, that is not loading and unloading. So they are actually in breach of what they're supposed to be doing. And I would encourage you to phone it in and report it, and I would encourage you to take it up with Tesco. I've certainly done so and been told that they're going to sort it out, but of course nothing actually happens. So the more people here who can take it up and just say what they're doing is unreasonable, I think the better. Ideally, report to Tesco. I mean, you know, the council can issue, as they do, they issue penalty tickets if they find that the truck is basically sitting stationary, not doing anything. They will issue penalty tickets.
I guess your point relevant to that, sir?
Yes.
Yes. I'll come back to the gentleman on the back row in a moment. I haven't forgotten you.
All I would say is that the chief executive for Tesco's lives in Richmond.
We'll check the electoral roll.
Thank you. Can you give the microphone to the gentleman on the back row, please?
And just while we're getting back to Robin on his question, a slight tangent, but just on Peter's point, the electric vehicles, it is the future. It is the way things are going. We've got to work out the positioning and the policy. The council will be going very big on it. There is a lot of money. We're waiting for the details in the budget to promote electric vehicles and chargers. And we expect to be at the forefront of that, and we want to see more and more.
Your turn, sir.
Thank you. My name is Robin Jarrett. We have an excellent weekly rubbish collection system in Kew and in the borough. I appreciate there are funding issues in the future. Are there any plans afoot to introduce fortnightly rubbish collection?
No plans, Robin. No plans at all. It is. We do realise the council funds. They are challenging, but we realise how important that is to residents, and it's certainly been one of our commitments, and will continue to be.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other questions? Right, I'm going to take the gentleman behind Mr. Dixon to start with, and then Mr. Dixon, and then the gentleman in front of him.
Stephen Bartlett from Royston Court on Lichfield Road. My questions or observations relate again to traffic policy, which I think is one of the major issues in this borough, and indeed to enforcement of traffic regulations, which has been touched on. There are two issues I want to raise. Firstly, they both concern the traffic management in the proximity of Victoria Gate of Kew Gardens. And they're two separate issues. Firstly, this summer in particular, those of us who live in this area have noticed that there are a considerable number of taxis, both black cabs and other sorts, who stop on double yellow lines or in disabled places, or indeed in people's garage run-ins, waiting to collect people when they come out of Kew Gardens, in some cases waiting for hire, and they keep their engines running, polluting the atmosphere while they're waiting, so that if they see a traffic warden, they can immediately pull away before they get a ticket. But this is an issue which has escalated, particularly this summer, that we have noticed. The other issue has to do with the dropping off and collection of large numbers of visitors in groups from coaches. In particular, coaches stop in the bus stop outside Victoria Gate, causing the 65 drivers to hoot their horns quite fruitlessly all day long. There is indeed a sign saying stopping only for buses on regular routes, which is blatantly ignored by coach drivers. One coach driver this summer I saw, having discharged his passengers, reversed his coach into Lichfield Road, totally blocking the road, and then proceeded to walk up and down his coach, checking if people had left their bags behind and this kind of stuff. And when he saw me taking a photograph of him, he did a little sort of dance to show how clever he was. I think both of these issues relate to the management of traffic around Victoria Gate, which to my mind is very unsatisfactory at present. and poses great problems for the general flow of through traffic. And you'll be aware that we had a fatal accident this summer with a motorbike. I won't comment on the circumstances. But I feel that we're going to get more and more problems like this as the number of visitors continues to grow, which is gratifying for Kew Gardens. And I'd like to ask whether the council is looking at these issues, and if so, what they think we ought to do about it.
Councillor Buckhall.
Yes, it's an issue that has grown over recent years. It used to be relatively benign, the parking along there for the Victoria Gate, and now we have it stretching throughout almost the length of the Kew Road, and as you say, we have taxis drawing up there, and we have coaches as well. So we started to engage with Kew Gardens. Officers have started to engage with Kew Gardens on this very subject, and I know we have another meeting coming up with them in January on where coaches might park and how to deal with taxis, and also to look at the parking along there to see how much it can take without blocking views and making the road less safe. So we are looking at it, and we're well aware of the problems. I won't go into the details of the fatal accident. It took me a long time to get to the bottom of what really happened there, but I don't think it was anything to do with the parking, quite honestly. So I think we just leave that one aside. And unfortunately, the young man on the motorcycle lost his life. So we have it in view. We are going to deal with it. We're talking to Kew Gardens about it. And as far as enforcement is concerned, obviously the police have to enforce it and they can't be around all the time. But what you can do is with your police liaison group meetings, which I presume you have in Kew, like in the other wards, is they can indeed have a bit of a campaign. This is what we do in Richmond, we'll say with cycling on the pavements. They can't be there all the time, they can't be there every day, but they can run a bit of a campaign. They can have a couple of days where they go along and they put notices on vehicles the first time, and then maybe they have another session a week or two later when they put sanction notices and start fining people. And that has a lot of effect. So if you bring it up with your police liaison group, and when they say, well, we don't really have the staff to do this, you can point out that they do have the staff because they can draw extra officers in for special campaigns, and that's one that they might think worth carrying out if you support it at your PLG meeting.
Thank you. I think Martin Taylor has a point before we go back to you, sir. Martin Taylor, trustee of the Kew Society. Kew Society and the Kew Residents Association have both been very active in this area this summer. Martin, are you going to comment on that, please?
Roger, thank you. You've slightly taken my point away, but it is fair to say, Councillor Buckwell, that a report was prepared jointly by the Kew Society and the Kew Residents Association on the issue of coach parking and the safety of pedestrians on the Kew Road, and particularly around the Victoria Gate, which included some suggestions as to solutions. Now, it's interesting that you confirm a meeting is being held with Kew Gardens in January. I don't think that either the Kew Residents Association or the Kew Society have heard about that meeting, if indeed they are to be invited.
Well, I can come back on that. No, it's not it's not a public meeting. It is purely officers and the management of Kew Gardens.
May I just come back with one small suggestion regarding traffic planning, particularly for the coaches which use the bus stop at the moment? I think it would be possible to erect better signage there, and possibly even to put in a closed-circuit television camera that could register such people. As typically they might be coaches from far away that maybe only come to Kew Gardens occasionally, and they may think they can get away with it. But that perhaps is something that it's within the council's powers to do.
Thank you very much. I've made a note of it.
Thank you. Giles Dixon, you're next.
Yeah, speak straight to the microphone.
I'll come to this side in a moment.
Hello, yes. One question with regard to broadband. What is the current position of BT providing a better broadband service within Kew.
Who is that?
You want me to answer that for? Well, I have to say I used to work at Virgin Media, competitor to BT. I'm not there anymore. Unfortunately, I don't think they don't share their plans with us. I know that there are that there are efforts and there's focus on it. That really is up to BT to provide that. We're trying to facilitate not only that, and as we heard earlier, wireless and Wi-Fi connectivity.
But the reason why I asked the question is because a few years ago BT applied, I think, for 70 applications for fibre optic boxes, and they were turned down by the council, apart from I think 2 of them.
Right.
I do think, I mean, I rely mainly on Virgin Media, but I do have a BT broadband connection, which is appalling, and it would be nice if we could be brought into the 21st century.
Yeah, well, look, I'll give Gareth, we'll get Gareth to go away and look at that and see where their proposals are for that, and working with them.
I actually had the same issue at home, very poor internet coverage, so I rang up BT and it turned out the routers that were given were out of date, and there is a number on the back of the router when you call them, so they sent another in the post. It works fabulously, but there also, you can put little enhancers on different floors as well that can improve the coverage, and the further you are away from the actual router, you can actually split it so that you can decrease, you can do it like on a twin band, so that if you've got several users, they've all got a chance of actually getting it through splitting the coverage through the router.
Thank you very much for that comment. Last question on this side at the moment, the gentleman in front of Mr. Dixon.
Hi, my name's Terry Nary. During the discussion about Brentford Community Stadium, Councillor Speak, you referred to some funding from Hounslow Council regarding, you said, parking improvements that will be implemented on Kew Green. Hopefully that will involve Gloucester Road as well. I just wondered if you had any more information on that.
I'm afraid here I'm going to have to defer to Peter, but the proposal was to get Section 106, which is the planning money that comes across from the developer to implement a CPZ, and it would, the original intention anyway, was it would include Gloucester Road and the roads off Kew Green as well. But the actual status, I don't know.
Councillor Buckland.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, I should know the status of that, and I know that Gloucester Road, as Councillor Speaker's just said, is included in it, and it is included in the review. But I'll have to ask officers where we are on that one.
Lady sitting by the wall with her hand up. Thank you.
I'm Vivian Ward, I live in the Avenue. Many school children take the 65 bus to schools within the borough, and on the way home from school they have to cross the avenue. I wonder how many of you have tried to cross the avenue. It is almost impossible. You have to wait for at least 3 or 4 cars to pass before you are able to cross safely. Now, I am careful and cautious. Children are neither careful nor cautious as a general rule, and they feel safe when they see a pedestrian crossing. How long do we have to wait until some child is injured or killed on the pedestrian crossing at the Kew Road, where Kew at the Avenue bus stop? I don't know whether anybody else round in this room has had that experience, but I personally have that experience on a regular basis, and so does my husband.
Which of the panel would like to take that?
I'll take that one up if I may. This is the crossing just outside the Kew greenhouse there, isn't it? Is that the one you're referring to?
There is a bus stop called the Avenue Bus Stop.
It's on Kew Road.
Yes, it's Kew Road. It's at right angles to the avenue, and many school children use that crossing.
Okay, well, okay. This is obviously a very good point that you make. I haven't come across it before, so I'll make a note, and I'll discuss it with officers, and we will review it. I don't know if Councillor Speak has some more to add to that. He's making signs at me there, so maybe he can help.
Again, this goes back to when I held that portfolio, but work was done to look at the crossing there. You're talking about the crossing across Kew Road, aren't you? Yes. Okay. And at the same time, work was done to look at the crossing at Liongate Gardens. Now, that one, as you probably know, has been upgraded into traffic light control. The other one at the avenue, I'm afraid that the number of people crossing wasn't deemed to be high enough to actually justify it. So work was done, consideration was given to it, but at the end of the day, they just said that there weren't enough people using it. So.
Thank you.
Many school children use that.
I think what we're saying. Use the microphone, please. Use the microphone, please. Otherwise, the world outside will not hear you.
Many school children use that.
Right. I hear what you say.
In the afternoon on their way back from school. They don't use it in the morning because they don't need to. Because it's on the Kew Gardens side. When they get off at the stop, alongside the wall of Kew Garden, they then have to cross over Kew Road. And I can assure you, cars are nearly always exceeding the speed limit. And as I say, they don't, as a rule, stop. I was amazed yesterday when a car stopped for me for the very first time in months. I actually thanked them.
Well, I take the point. It's well made, and thank you very much indeed. And in spite of what was found before, we'll have another look at that. It may mean possibly some traffic calming measures either side of the crossing, I don't know. And I won't preempt anything that may come up, but we will look at that. It's a very serious and important point. Thank you for making it.
Thank you. The gentleman there with his hand up, please.
My name is Malcolm Churchill and I live in Gloucester Court. I am suffering from what I believe is called light pollution at the moment, specifically very much from the floodlights which surround the new Queen's School. And the problem has been made 100% worse in the last week because they've just built a new building which apparently is going to be for store. I'm not quite sure what it's storing, but it has got floodlights attached to the outside of it. What I'd like to ask the councillors is, does every floodlight have to have planning permission? I'd also like to ask, what is my best course of action in trying to oppose these lights, which could be re-sited and illuminate the same area perfectly well? Thank you very much.
Yes, and I mean the simple answer to your first question is yes. Floodlights certainly are part of the planning considerations. The best course of action, I don't know this particular case, I'm going to go back and have a look at it. At the time of a planning application is to raise it as an issue at that time, and it will be considered by the planning authority. But I don't know this particular case, but if it is a problem, I will go back and find out what the situation is, because you may find that they already have a planning constraint on it that they're not following.
Yeah, I can answer part of that question because I work closely with the Queen's School, so I can take up the issue because you also mentioned the fact that the lights are coming on at 6 in the morning, which is, you know, quite valid, and the school isn't open. So it might mean repositioning or just putting up a timer, looking at another solution to it. But as part of their planning permission, they haven't got floodlights. So I don't know, maybe there's light in the sense that I haven't seen at night. I go to that school twice a day. But it's something I can raise with Miss Bentham on your behalf.
I was just going to say, I've seen this in other schools. I used to be in charge of schools, and it is absolutely going back to the schools and not only just making sure that that things are complying with planning permission, but that lights aren't coming on when they're not supposed to. And that does happen sometimes, and schools are very good at working with us to help that. So we'll take that back with them.
Yes, is your point relevant to this?
Sorry,
To do with lighting, I just wanted to say there's a street lamp outside my house which hasn't worked since April, and that is because the post is made of concrete. I understand the policy now of the council is not to allow men to climb concrete posts to change the bulb, although I have offered to do it myself with my own ladder at my own risk if they would supply the appropriate bulb.
And where is your house, sir?
It's behind the Greyhound is number 6 Theatres Terrace.
Right. Thank you. I'm sure note will be taken of that.
Well,
Can I comment on that? There's no policy which says that we won't change the lamps out on concrete posts. I've no idea why the thing has been out since April, because in fact, as a council, we have a very good record on replacing the lamps. We have to replace about 2,000 more lamps a year, and our average time for doing that at the moment is 2.8 days from the time that the outage is advised to the council. So we have quite a good record. Our KPI is 5 days, so we're quite pleased about that. Now I hear that here's a lamp that's been out since April, and I'm a bit distressed about that. But anyway, we will get it replaced, don't worry, we can do that. You might have heard that our policy is to replace all the concrete lampposts in the borough, which we are doing, and we're replacing the lights with LED lights as we go, because of course they have a very much smaller power requirement than the current sodium lights do. So it will be replaced in time, but before that we'll get the bulb changed.
Yes, could I just come back? As far as the Queen's School is concerned and their floodlights, I have tried to find out exactly what the purpose of them is. It's rather unclear to me, but at the moment they've signed straight into my flat, which is a first floor flat, in the worst possible position as far as the floodlights are concerned. I would just make a small comment. Somebody came round to my flat not very long ago and looking at the school with all its floodlights on and everything, said, reminded them of what they thought a prisoner of war camp would be like. And she asked when the watchtowers might be built. That just exaggerates what the situation is, but I would like it looked at.
Thank you.
May I ask for your address, sir? So, and when you say someone came round, was that someone from the council or just a visitor?
No, just a friend of mine.
Just a friend.
Comes from the company.
What's your address, sir? Sorry?
We'll get it after.
51 Gloucester Court.
51
Gloucester Kent Road.
Thank you very much.
Gentleman over here, please. Over here.
Yeah, sorry.
Nigel Rice. I recently lodged a petition with yourselves, which took some years to get round to doing, but it is to attempting to make sure that Kew Green is no longer used as a public car park. And the outcome we'll wait and see. But it's worth mentioning that Strand on the Green got a CPZ policy just 5 days ago, and already you see any number of people saving the residents' parking. They're willing to walk over Kew Bridge morning and evening to stick their car. Sorry, they leave it on Kew Green overnight in order to avoid residents' parking. On a different subject, I have the same parking subject, which is very emotive. One of my children lives in Highbury Crescent, and when Arsenal are at home, they have incredibly tight parking restrictions. And when Brentford and London Irish start playing up the road, it is imperative that everybody who goes to that stadium, and God knows how they ever got permission, has to come by public transport. We must make it impossible for them to park anywhere near the stadium.
Very good point.
Yes. Councillor Buckler.
Yes, it's a very good point that you make. We must make sure that, that they're unable to park anywhere near Kew Green, and we must make it tight enough that it's just not worth them thinking that they can drive to the stadium and pop across the bridge to park. One of the problems with putting into place car parking zones is you displace a lot of the car parking, and those vehicle owners who can no longer park in their favourite spot look for somewhere nearby, and it does create a bit of a ripple effect outward from the new car parking zones. But we are looking at it, and we will deal with it to make sure it's watertight for games at the new Brentford ground.
Councillor Hodgins.
No, I was just going to say endorse that, and we've got. Councillor Elliott has that same where he's got Twickenham Stadium right next to him. So and the Harlequins. So yes, we will be looking at that and understand your point very much there.
Special match day, do have special match day systems, so it may be something that can be looked at, so that it may not necessarily be a widespread CPZ, but just special for match day.
Thank you. Did I see any more hands on this side of the room? No, all right, I'll give this side another go. Thank you.
So I'd like to move in a completely different direction. So if you go to Kew Gardens, and you know you can walk down the path where there's this absolutely magnificent view of the river, there's just two rather nasty shrubs that completely ruin the view. And I've been told, or it's completely unclear who's responsible for cutting them down, but it was clear if it's a protected view, you would never consider those shrubs part of the view. But it's at the bend where it's in a wide open space where you amble down past the lake. Yes, it's on the towpath side, otherwise the Kew lads would have cut it down years ago.
David, any comment on it?
Only if you'd like to, perhaps we can have a word afterwards.
Yeah, certainly.
We can have a,
Any further questions? Yes, sir.
Hi, this is another question about Gloucester Road, or regarding Gloucester Road. If you drive around the South Circular around Clapham, you find a lot of protection of adjoining roads for access by traffic. We have a recent problem. We've got 4 access roads from the South Circular. We've got Forest Road, Cambridge Road, Kent Road, and Kew Green. And what's happened in the last couple of years is that the sat-navs are now directing people off the South Circular, down Gloucester Road, round the Green, and then turning right by the zebra crossing at the bridge. And I just wondered if, had the council thought about, or giving any protection to roads that feed off the South Circular? Is there anything happening in that?
Councillor Bucknell, is that in your...
It is my area. I know of no scheme to do that at the moment. It is a problem with sat-navs. I must admit that they do sometimes direct an unknowing lorry driver into all sorts of places, and I mean, we know that from our own experience, I'm sure, using sat-navs and ending up in funny places. There is a scheme which is being looked at to try and map more carefully lorry routes and particularly HGV routes to the sat-nav companies and GPS. That is being looked at across London. I don't know that that's going to give immediate relief to your problem, but we'll have a look at it. The problem is, you see, if you're going to restrict heavy vehicles along those roads, then you've got such a scheme has to be self-managing, basically, and that means bollards, and then that means difficulties with refuse collection, and then when people want to move house, how do they get the rather larger removal vehicles down? Well, of course, exceptions can be made, but I'm actually looking at one of these schemes at the moment in Richmond, down a couple of very narrow roads, and we're out to consultation, and I'm afraid those against such a scheme outnumber those in favour it quite considerably. So what may seem a good idea, when it's put together in practice and a scheme is developed and put to the residents, it's not always supported.
I take a response from you, sir, then Councillor Lynette, and then there's a gentleman behind. I've seen you, sir.
I just want to ask, do you know where Gloucester Road is? Do you know Gloucester Road?
Yes, I know Gloucester Road.
Well, maybe you would agree that it is in a bit of an unfortunate position.
Yes.
Because it is South Circuit. So I wondered whether you might look at that, as a special case. You don't have to consider every road.
No, certainly we can look at it as a special case, and I will take it up.
And you mentioned problems with refuse vehicles. The refuse truck doesn't come down Gloucester Road because it can't fit down the road because there are white vans on both sides. It's one of the narrowest roads in Kew. So what it does is it comes to the end of Cambridge Road, and the people come and pick the stuff up and take it to the Cambridge Road, which is I doubt if a fire engine could get there. So I'd just like to say that some roads are in a more dire straits than others. So.
Thank you, Councillor Lynette.
Thank you, Chair. I had also asked Councillor Buckwell to look at the Kew rail bridge where lorries get stuck under it coming from both directions, and had asked him to look at that in terms of going to the sat-nav companies and see if we can't get that sorted out once and for all, because although there is good signage either side of the rail bridge, it still means that there are big lorries heading in. But the other point that I wanted to make is that I heard you suggest that you were going to look at Gloucester Road for CPZ, a CPZ consultation. I think it needs to be widened out into that whole area around there. There are several roads around there, and if you just put the CPZ into Gloucester Road, you're going to get a ripple effect into the other roads. So, I suggest that you look at all of those roads.
There's a gentleman who's waiting behind. I'll take him next, please. You two with your hand up.
Hello, Andrew Brown. I live in Forest Road, and my points relate both to CPZ and to rat running. CPZs are very contentious. We have voted twice, I think 2003, 2005 we were consulted, and everyone voted against, perhaps because we recognise that they're all our own cars, and actually the busiest times on Bushwood Road, Gloucester Road, often is Sunday evening, and it is only generally local residents. There has been since then a secular increase in the number of cars, fully recognise that. Also cars are getting bigger, so this is, people seem to need Land Rovers and things, like Range Rovers, in Kew. Before we suddenly clamp down and have 24-hour CPZ because of a potential football match problem, which is still a couple of years ahead, could we try some other sensible local measures like a 6'6" width restriction on the south end of Gloucester Road and at the west end of Priory, Bushwood, and Gloucester, sorry, south end of Forest Road, and the west end of Gloucester, Bushwood and Priory Road. You don't have to have bollards. It's self-enforcing because the way the cars are parked down the road. Trouble with the CPZ is it might actually reduce the number of cars parked in the road and people would feel free to go faster and bigger things. But if you had 6'6" maximum, that would deter some of the larger vehicles. You could also put no entry except for access. There are still signs like that in some parts of the country, and that would deter people who didn't know anything about the area. It doesn't need much enforcement. Again, you could have a special swoop by the police, as was mentioned earlier. I think we should do those sorts of practical measures now. There is some merit in having quite congested roads. It slows the people down. It may then also mean they won't show up on the sat-nav. It's a good place for it to come. Thank you.
Thank you. The gentleman in front here. Yes, no, the chap over. No, the chap in front of you.
So, just a very fast comment. The signage for Mortlake Road, where you indicated for the lorries can't get through, actually it's not good, it's terrible. because the flashing sign comes on after they've actually exited Kew Road, coming down and turned left into Mortlake Road. So by that point, they're committed. There's no place they could actually turn around anyway. So the signage indicating they're not allowed should happen before the turn.
Thank you. You behind said that you have one final comment from you.
Sorry to go on this, but Forest Road and Gloucester Road are obviously completely different. We're already... Gloucester Road has a huge majority of people wanting a CBZ. We've written to Michael Potter, Chief Engineer, about it, and he wrote 18 months ago, and we've just written again recently. But we're suffering the ripple effect already from, Blair Bourne Park, all the other roads in the queue. And we have the big issue is long-term parking, people leaving vans there for weeks, people park there and then go on holiday, etc. So that's one of the problems, that we've got two completely different stories, but the problems in the roads are very different, because Forest Road is not the centre of Rat Run, and it's not so easy to just get off the South Circuit and drop your car there.
Right, thank you very much. We have time, I think, for just one more comment that comes from the gentleman on the aisle here.
Ian Mulligan, and this is for Councillor Fleming. Could you renegotiate the paper and cardboard blue box collection so that they collect the cardboard boxes that don't fit in the blue boxes? Because on Monday afternoons east of the railway, Tuesday afternoons west of the railway, you see the upturned blue boxes being emptied, and you see the cardboard cartons which haven't been collected.
Well, I'm very happy to take that up with our contractors. I'm not sure our assistant director is here as well, so we can. I'll speak to the ask her to speak to the contractors about this. Okay.
Thank you very much. Well, we've been here, ladies and gentlemen, for 2 hours and 5 minutes. I'm going to leave the final few minutes to Leader of the Council, Councillor Hodge.
Thank you, Roger. Sorry, I wanted to make one point, and it would be good to get everybody aware. There is something happening at the moment that people do need to be aware of it in the future, but it has the potential to tremendously impact an area like Kew, which is, you will see in the press at the moment, all of the pressure on housing. And this big push by the Mayor and by the government to just be going after housing. Now the Mayor has just come out with what is called the London Plan, which is going to be consulted on over the next few months. And across each borough, he has set, and the government is doing the same thing, set very, very ambitious targets for housing. Now everybody agrees that we need more housing in the area and in the region. The question is how to do it and how to accomplish it. And the problem with what we've got at the moment, and is being pushed by the Mayor, is that they are just pushing volume of houses, and they're looking at a very large proportion of the housing being delivered on small sites and where existing houses are, including garden infill. So in Richmond, and actually we get off lighter than other areas, we've got a target over the next 10 years of about 8,000, just over 8,000 more houses. So that's about a 10% increase in the borough, which when you think about it, all these issues that we've talked about tonight, about traffic and transport and congestion and these other things, they will just get exacerbated. And while we're moving to electric cars and maybe self-driving cars, and we've got to look at the issues of transport, this makes it much, much harder. Now the problem for our area is not just the increase in numbers, but also the majority of that 8,000, just over 6,000, is being proposed to come from these small sites and from garden infill. Now, to illustrate that, one of the ways that the Mayor is saying that housing needs to be added is that over the next 10 years, about 10% of detached and semi-detached houses
should effectively be replaced by 2.2 houses. So whether they're knocked down or they're just infill. And that, of course, adds numbers, but it changes the character of the area. So and brings these additional complications in closer to my and it impacts here sort of between our two areas. We've got the Mortlake brewery development, for example, and of course residents are very worried about that and sort of pushing back, and we're helping to push back, arguing over the numbers. And I'm saying to them, yes, we've got to focus on that, but you've got to be aware that actually represents less than half of the housing, the additional housing in the area that is being pushed at the moment. So, so we are pushing back on that and saying, you know, Richmond is a beautiful place to live. London is a great city because of the livable areas that it's got, and we need to retain that. And the way to grow London is not just up and in; it's got to be out, and you've got to look at things like where the school's going to go and other things. There is everybody is saying they want to protect Greenbelt and no building on Greenbelt, which is fine. But if you take up all the brownfield site with housing, where are those extra schools going to go? And we're already having to put schools on MOL land in certain areas, and Gareth has in his ward an issue with that, where in Twickenham they're fighting over which patch of Greenbelt does the school go on. So we're already facing very difficult decisions. So we are pushing back on this, but the more voice and awareness that we've got, the better. So I would encourage you to go on to the Mayor's website, look at the London plan, look at the headline, feedback, because what we can't do is in this rush to build housing is forever change the character of a residential area like Kew. And he needs to hear back about what people think about that, and the expansion needs to be done right, not just this rush. So it's a thing that we're very concerned about, sort of happening in the background, but people need to be aware of it. Community associations, local associations need to be feeding back on it. And I just wanted to raise that as an issue, because otherwise we'll be here in 10 years. Well, hopefully we'll be here in 10. Somebody will be here in 10 years, and the issues will be even worse.
Well, thank you very much, Councillor. That seems to me to be a very appropriate point to bring this meeting to a close. I'd like to thank you all for coming. I'd like to thank our questioners for their questions, which have covered a very good range, I think, of topics. And I'd like to thank our councillors on the panel and on the floor for speaking to those questions.
And Roger, could we thank you as well for sharing? Thank you all.